how many former league MVPs have had to sign for the minimum? Just asking for a friend. Ridiculous. A transcendent talent. And less talented quarterbacks are getting $15 million, $16 million a year. It's disgusting. The Patriots' fines for Spygate are higher than Cam's base salary of $1.1 million. More context. His base salary will be the exact same figure as one of his projected backups in Brian Hoyer. Dan Orlovsky joining the conversation. Good to have you with us, Dan. Stephen A., I'll start with you. Do you agree with Sherman here on Cam's weak salary?
1,000%. 1,000%. All you need to know is this. From my understanding, Cam Newton and Jameis Winston are getting paid less than Chase Daniels. That's all you need to know. And that's really what this comes down to. You know, we're not talking about $25 million by Phillip Rivers or $27 to $28 million by Matt Stafford or $30 million by Matt Ryan. The list goes on and up with Aaron Rodgers, Carson Wentz, Dak Prescott. Now that he's signed his, his franchise tag, exclusive franchise tag, we're talking about $7 million, and that's where you get to after incentives. Why did Cam Newton have to settle for that is the question. It's because he didn't really have any takers out there. A lot of it had to do with how he was sabotaged by the Carolina Panthers because of the late date with which they let him go. Part of it is people questioning not just the injury history, because we understand that, a foot injury, a shoulder injury, prior to that, we get that point. But you've had people talking about attitude issues with Cam Newton. These are the kind of things that people have said and have done to contribute to the diminished cachet of Cam Newton, a former league MVP in this league. Again, due to his injuries and stuff like that, I would perfectly understand if he had a one-year deal at about $20 million like Teddy Bridgewater or something along those lines. But to sit up there and have a deal, you're Cam Newton, you're 31 years of age, your upside is tremendous if you're healthy. The last time we saw him healthy, he was 6-2, completing 67.9% of his passes. And because of injuries, even though he's shown that he's coming back healthy, he had to settle for less than $8 million. I think it's incredibly egregious, and I think Richard Sherman makes a very, very valid and salient point, and I think it's undeniable.
Max?
Well, I usually agree with Richard Sherman. We're on the same side of most of these issues. I disagree with him, labor issues, basically. Not to mention issues of race. Like Richard Sherman says a lot of smart things. I just disagree with him here about Cam. First of all, Stephen A., Jameis and Cam, two very different situations. Jameis has an interception problem and has never been an elite quarterback. Cam was the best football player on planet Earth as voted by his peers not all that long ago. So I understand whoa, Cam Newton signed for what? And I've been saying all along, some smart team is going to scoop up Cam Newton. And sure enough, it was the smartest team that scooped him up for pennies on the dollar. Now, is there something wrong with him getting pennies on the dollar? I don't actually think so this season. The issue with Cam is injury. And teams did not want to commit big money or long-term money to a guy who could be hurt. Now, if Cam was also seen as like a model leader off the field and a guy who was comfortable in front of the camera and represented the franchise as best possible, then I think he'd be given the benefit of the doubt a little bit more in terms of the contract. But he hasn't been. He seemed uncomfortable in front of the cameras a lot of the time, and has. It's not that he's had some egregious breach in his behavior, but he hasn't carried himself all the time the way a lot of teams would like their franchise quarterback to carry themselves. Now, that's not the primary driver of this. The primary driver is injury. But when you have the other stuff, then the injury will be forgiven a little bit, or at least the best case scenario might be mapped onto that player a bit more than with Cam. This is what I anticipate, because under Norv Turner, Cam maybe had his best season until the injury. He got injured that year, but was as good as his MVP year in certain respects and better in other respects. I anticipate the following to happen for Cam if he can stay healthy, even if he doesn't run the way he used to. If Cam can stay healthy with the Patriots and he has a good season, which I anticipate he will, I think he's going to sign a big, fat contract after this year. This short-term one-year deal is the, okay, prove that you're healthy contract. And once he does, if he can, Cam Newton is not like a lot of these bargain bin type quarterbacks. Andy Dalton or Jameis Winston or someone like that, and Dalton got paid more than Jameis. Cam Newton was once upon a time the elite football player in the world. All he's got to do is prove his health, and a big fat contract is his next year would be my prediction.
Yeah, listen, the contract is not fair, but the NFL is not a fair world. Life is not fair. So to Richard Sherman's point, it's not a fair contract, but I understand why it is the way that it is. And Max, you're 100% correct. The contract is what it is because he didn't play football last year. It's because he plays quarterback and he's had two surgeries on his shoulder in the last 2 years. He's coming off 3 surgeries in the last 2 seasons. I mean, that's the number one. We all know that. Like that's why I'm a little bit confused by this. I understand what he was in 2015 as the MVP of the NFL, and the last time we saw him healthy, he was great. But he hasn't played in over a year, and that's why the contract and numbers-wise are where they are. Stephen A., you're 100% correct that the timing is what hurt him because 32 teams in the NFL, right? And so everyone's looking of what their situation is going to be when it comes to free agency. He was not released in time, so that pool gets shrunk once teams decide who their free agent selection is at the quarterback spot. So then maybe we're down to 20 teams. And then the draft comes, and his name is not necessarily part of everything before the draft. So teams make selections at that position. And then that 20 group gets down to 10 or 8. And then you have to figure out what teams are comfortable with his health. I mean, the New England Patriots have even come out themselves and have said, we don't know what his health is. Mike, they don't even know if he's healthy or not. Dan Graziano said this morning, if he's not healthy, he could see him not even being on the roster. And so there is still that question that is unanswered of what his health is. We can't really use the Jameis Winston contract as a conversation piece because Jameis has come out and said he took less money to go to New Orleans.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.